All right, Ramblers, let's ramble. We have a special guest today for the kids. We've got John Acquaviva. John has been around the electronic dance music scene, which I know he's going to call me out on for using that term. House music, electronic music. He's been around um, for as long as I can remember. He's done these little tiny clubs, these dingy clubs. He's done stadiums. He's done it all. I think you've done Ibiza. You've been there since the beginning. He's now would you say now you're more of an entrepreneur than DJ?
Well, I kind of run the gamut, so I'm hard to define because I consider myself an iconoclast, or rather, I drop that hint. I'm easily bored, so um, you know, uh, I when I'll try to give jokes, because I'm socially awkward. So I joke I'm still on the spectrum. I'm a rainbow, so I have a short attention span, but luckily I juggle a lot of balls and I don't drop them in my mind, or at least when you look back, and I do have some accomplishments. And thank you for the kind intro. When you say electronic dance music, that's cool. I think EDM, for at least those of us who've been around a little longer, is kind of, maybe negative. It's too, let's give it a, three letters. But
Sure.
electronic dance music culture is great, and I'm actually now trying to be graceful of being old enough that I take great pride in having loved disco. I started off DJing disco records, and I love disco. Techno was a thing that got me on the international stage. So but it's not the be all and end all. And we did house music. We loved house music. Started electro house. So Rich Houghton went on to do minimal. It's like eating food. I'm not a guy who's only eaten steak and potatoes in my life, and I try to have a well balanced diet. So the context, thank you, and I'm happy to convey and bring that broader context and consideration into our discussion, because I've looked at things from different angles over different times, and I'd like to think in a kind way that I do have because of my passion both locally in London and internationally, more profound um, um, taste and experience, and I'm happy to share that. What this means to me, what I've seen, and the context of all that. So I'm really happy to have this kind of conversation, because we can talk about backstage stories, but the overall context is really cool. And yeah, I'll close with the fact that I started DJing full time in London in 1982 at Notes, a very famous discotheque, and
Notorieties.
I've done about 6,000 shows as a national and international DJ when I became professional in 1982. So now I'm really dating myself for
Yeah.
when when depending on who your students and listeners are.
Yeah, and just for my students, just for and just the demographic in general, when we talk about there's so many different kinds of electronic dance. I mean, there's drum and bass, and there's techno, and there's house, and there's just so many different kinds, right? And I'm just kind of being reductionist just for conversation's sake. But I'd like to go back in history now, because you did come to Canada from Italy with your parents.
Yeah.
At one point, you're in high school. At that point, when you're in high school, are you heavily involved in music just yourself, like playing instruments, or are you just doing whatever high schoolers do at that point?
Well, yeah, the this is actually a quote, but it's a bad quote because it's from the opening of Thriller, Michael Jackson. I'm not like the other boys. Well, I mean, I'm not like Michael Jackson, but it's kind of funny. I was always, if anything, precocious, different. And I went to Catholic Central, and I have a funny history that, depending on, I've hung out with different cohorts. So I think I was perceived as a bit of a nerd because as much as I was an immigrant, it turns out that, and I'm so thankful my parents, um, and our parents know each other, immigrated to Canada. Imagine if our parents immigrated to Argentina or Venezuela. You and I may not be having this conversation.
Absolutely.
I'm one of the first and last, at least in my family, of a meritocratic breed. So I'm very thankful that we went to Canada. I'm very thankful I had my opportunities. It turned out, I was kind of that special child, except I was precocious. So I will brag a little bit that
Well,
in
can
high school,
I
for
have to jump
example,
in there. I got to
please,
jump in
please,
there for a second.
please. Yeah, but
So,
call me out. That's fine. No,
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 I'm
no,
not calling
or
you out. I
whatever.
want to
Yeah,
I'm going to
yeah,
verify what you just said, because
yeah. Please do.
you were
Or
on the Reach for the Top team.
I
And
would,
for those who
yeah.
don't
So
know, the Reach for the
Yeah,
Top team. You got 4 kids from each high school, so it's
yeah,
four
I
against
think,
four.
wow, good one.
One
Yeah,
kid always answers all the questions for his
that was
team, and
me.
you were that guy. You answer
Ooh,
all the
ooh, ooh,
questions.
ooh. Yeah.
And I
So
rem
on one hand, I was a precocious guy. I was smart, but I was also know-it-all. I still kind of am. I like to pretend, or I and so yeah, I won a scholarship to Reach for the Top. So some people thought of me. So it's funny. Like I wasn't maybe really a cool kid, but I was kind of a smart kid. Obviously, to win Reach for the Top, I was a pretty good student, but I was also a bit of a rule breaker. But Reach for the Top was a goal I set, and it was like the first, and for a while I thought maybe the only thing I would achieve in life, but I was really committed to learning, and it was more interesting than school and stuff. I was really good at math, so I went to Catholic Central. I went to university at a young age. I started at the same time to hopefully keep me out of trouble, but that didn't happen. And then but I had my music friends. So the funny story that very few people don't know is that the only job I ever had is I worked as a porter at the Ramada Inn, which is in on the Wellington 401 intersection. So at 16, 17, I was a porter. But they had one of the discotheques. So there was a handful of discotheques at the end of the 70s. Now, I think it was still, 19 years old to get in. But I always loved music. I was buying music and playing them at my school dances from, elementary school to wherever I could. And then I was working on weekends, and I was able to go into the discotheque, and it was the DJ there. I forget his name. There's another guy, Mike, who was playing at the whatever Hampton Inn. There was like a few things, but because I was a busboy and I was young, I could go after hours, and I was getting into the discos at 17, 18 because I was friends, and then I started working at Kochek. But I saw bands like Kool and the Gang, and then Grand Power Local. But Kool, like all these bands would stop by and play at these hotel discos at the end of the 70s, and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then I could go in and practice on the 1200s. Now the parties I was doing were belt drive turntables. So again, I'm really dating myself, and people are like, what are belt drive turntables? Well, exactly. Well, if you ever seen an engine that has a belt on it, that's how turntables used to work before scratching. So, without going too deep and distracted, I was part of a cohort, but I was also the last of four, I think, very, if I may be so bold, great masters. The people in London were great mixers, and they earned money, and there was quite a club culture. Factor of, London was a throughway. It's famous for rock and roll. I've got friends, a lot of people. I was just with a couple guys like this guy, John Rowland, Nick Peniakis or whatever. They brought Kiss to town. They were like all the guys that played with the bands coming through, from Robbie Robertson to, so London has a history, and hence a museum, and hence an office, quite a culture. Jack Richardson. I mean, and then gosh, it just now I'm blanking out trying to cover history. But the man, Bob Ezrin, right? Everyone's got London roots. Significant people have London roots in music, and I wasn't aware of it then. But London, and each generation, was pretty good for a small city. We also had a great punk scene. I was into disco, but we had Fryfogels, we had
Call the office a little bit later.
well, before Call the Office, but I mean
Later, yeah.
everyone from Duran Duran to Psychedelic Furs, everyone's played London because it was a stopover on Thursday. So London, when you look back, has had all kinds of people, and I was able to become the backup DJ at Notorieties, which was for me the best club. And I was the backup of a guy called Joe Bodner. He was the third in line. A guy called Terry Kelly went on to be the big DJ at RPM, which became the Government. So any of you people listening, the Government is one of the all-time great EDM clubs in the history of the world. Toronto, Montreal.
Absolutely.
And then so Terry Kelly was the resident in the 90s when it was called RPM. And before that, this guy, Jeff Galbraith. So Joe Bonner got a job in Toronto, 1982, to play at the Copa, which is the second big super club. The first one was the Diamond, because I was there, and there's others, but the marker was the Diamond.
Coca's
about 800 people.
young in Bay Area, like where there's a Loblaws there now.
But the Copa was in Yorkville.
Yorkville,
and
yeah,
it was
right.
1,500 people. But my guy Joe was number two. He was making $2,500 a week in 1982. I can say that now. So I come from a school of guys who were never broke. I also was in school and I have a pretty high level of mathematics and I studied to be an actuary.
Oh.
So, my goal, and as much as I upset my immigrant parents because I was smart at school, I mean, do I make $100,000 a year, hopefully pretty soon, being a banker, or an insurance guy or DJ? I'm like, I'm going to have a party and have a good time. And unlike my friends, try to save some money. So here I am. So when I talk at schools, I'm like, if you're smart, afford a good hobby. I bet on myself. I don't recommend that. I'm err on the side of caution when I advise people, but I took high risk and it turned out well. So it's a nice story, and I get speaking engagements for that because if I can do it, you too can do it. But it's fraught with peril along the way. So that, I think, is an important history. Since we're doing this call based in London, it's important to address that history. And I've also come home to London this week to deal with that. We're going to do a little show. I don't know when the podcast comes out, but we're going to do a free event September 7 with the community at Covent Garden this year. So in retrospect, you'll have missed the show, but I'm here trying to do something special. I don't really do much in London. And then with respect to what you spoke about, the irony is that appreciative we all came, and we're talking in Canada, but this immigrant Italian guy could afford to move back, and I live in Ibiza, which is pretty cool. So I'm pretty close to where I was born, and I do like the Mediterranean and the lifestyle. So life is good. It's hard to complain. I've come full circle. There you go.
I couldn't imagine with, again, you got the proof because you're getting the scholarships, you're doing very well. I remember some of my friends thinking, I wonder if he's like, is he going to become a doctor or as an engineer? I can't imagine what that conversation with your Italian immigrant parents would have been like. For you, was it just a matter of, listen, I'm doing what I love, or did you actually see that this was going somewhere? Were you like a visionary that you saw this thing is going to take off?
Well, look, I don't want to paint the with with a broad brush, but I don't know about you and how many conversations you had with your immigrant parents, and I'm not trying to call you,
Maybe
so
two.
let's just say, let's just say English is my first language, and we don't really speak English in the house. And let's just say we speak a very minimal amount. And I love my parents, but they came after the war. They're technically illiterate, but boy, am I proud of them and thankful and respectful of them. I knew your father had passed away, and my father. I mean, they're cantankerous, lovable people. Our mothers are the saints. They're epitome of what good Catholicism is. So, as much as I struggled looking back, I'm like, wow, I'm glad, whether I agreed or not, how strong they were. And yeah, the short answer is, like, do you think I had a conversation with my mother and father about my future with all due respect? No, it was very difficult.
That is so honest.
Other than, I don't know, you've got a nice position, but even when I became famous, like, hey, do you need any money? What the hell are you really doing? They couldn't. The only time they saw my parents, the only time they saw me, they'll see me here, is about 5 years ago. I was invited to my village. My parents have never seen me play. My father's 91 this year. My mother's 85. And they've never seen me play. I just knew I worked in a disco. But my village invited me back, and I brought my whole family. And for 1 week, my mother and father were celebrated. And it was probably the best week. I think it resonated with my entire family. My sister says, wow, it changed my life because people respected our family. And it was sort of through my luck but work. And my parents, not understanding what the hell I did, they went back and were celebrated for a week. And I don't know about some of the listeners there, but it's hard going to a new country, and I hated that. Luckily, I was able to get beyond that. But my parents' struggles for 1 week were like forgotten, and we were celebrated, and I did it for them. I didn't want to do that. I really don't like to be celebrated, but I'm glad I've done a few things for my family to be celebrated, and that was priceless. Their struggles for that week were like, and a lot of people struggle. Canada's full of people, first and second generation, and it's hard to be gracious sometimes with the lot we get as immigrants. I speak very well now, and I'm lucky, but not everyone adjusts, and my parents never adjusted. But boy, I'm glad to be in Canada. and at least my parents weren't marginalized, and I had my
Yeah.
opportunities, and it's a happy ending. And but my parents had never seen me. What the fuck did our son
Yeah.
do? He should have been
Yeah.
an engineer or a banker. I
Yeah.
am now, but it
Right.
took me a
Right.
while.
Yeah, it is
Not
interesting
an
though. I,
engineer.
I remember seeing your father at a funeral like 10 years ago, and like I don't know what he's like at home. Like most Italians, they don't actually say nice things to their kids. Usually, they tell other strangers nice things about their kids. And I remember he was actually very effusive about you, and he was very proud. So I don't know if he ever told you that, but again, that's the Italian immigrant way, not the Italian way. The Italian immigrant way is
Sure. Yeah,
actually
the
not
old
to.
school way.
Yeah.
It's come back to me, but yeah, I mean, without getting into therapy on camera here, but there wasn't a lot of hugs given out in our family, but that's okay.
No, it wasn't the
I now
Cosbys.
love my parents now, and I moved back into the house. I literally sold my house, so I live in the house where we bought in White Oaks, that it wasn't clear how our lives are going to turn out. And I was joking with my sister about this, and that, you know, um, I did not have happy moments in this house. And I came back for sort of catharsis, and it's been painful, but um, it's something I had to do. It was the final thing of coming to peace with whatever issues I had, because it's easy sometimes when you're successful. And the music business is like this, or if you're in sports. Some people respect where they come from. Other people are like, I can't wait to get the hell out of here and never see these people again. I don't know, who's exactly listening, and I know what you went through. But to be honest, when you have such a life of going to a new country, first of all, what the hell did my parents do to me? And then, damn them. Well, actually, it's not what did they do for you. It's hard to think about that when you're young. And win or lose, even some people who win are not gracious. And one of my saving graces, I believe, was to be gracious. It's hard for me to complain about how hard my life is and that I'm not flying first class all the time, or I'm not flying private jets. I mean, average people can't relate to that. So, shut up. When my young friends go like, "Oh, I didn't get upgraded to first class," I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, people would wish they could travel the world in luggage, in your luggage. So I try to be thankful and not complain too much, but I do try to be a little bit irreverent, maybe. And I mean,
That's a
life is hard. I mean, when you have to
it is.
make stuff up and
Yeah.
be successful and just fly by the seat of your pants.
Oh,
But
absolutely. It is hard. I love the fact that you're talking about the discotheque because when you were starting as a DJ, disco was getting a bad name, right? Like
yeah,
because everybody was shitting on disco, and
sure.
they were bring your disco records to the baseball game, and they
To
would
burn
like
them, Chicago,
and they would
Wrigley
burn them.
Field,
Chicago, yeah.
evil. Yeah,
But if it
yeah, it's
wasn't for
terrible.
disco, we don't have house music, and right?
Correct. Correct. And it's funny because the incident that happened at Wrigley Field, and I forget the DJ, I wrote him off in my memory, but yeah, I mean, North America is just that rock culture. It was the dominant culture. And they're like, disco was always like, you call that music? And then drum machines came in. I've actually written something I'll publish very soon about this, and I'll share it with you. I'll post it probably on my Instagram after my show in London. But basically, rock and roll. I love real musicians, and I never answered your question earlier. I went to CCH, and yeah, I was in the band. I can read and write music. My parents luckily afforded lessons. I tried to play guitar. I was not good at it, but I loved music, so I expressed myself by DJing. And eventually, it dawned on me that I can put a collage of other people's sounds together. But I was in the jazz band, the orchestra. I played everything from French horn to tuba because I'm lazy. I wasn't good enough, but I played all the easier instruments because I could kind of fake it. But I loved music, and I wanted to play percussion, but I wasn't maybe that good. But then when I bought a drum machine, so I do have a history of trying to be part of a band or express myself musically, to kind of answer the question from earlier. And then, yeah, disco was not um, well, it was just like, yeah, again, like, look, maybe it's not appropriate, but we talked about our immigrant background. So, as a non-visible, well, yeah, someone will quote this. I was going to say, as a non-visible minority, I always felt like, again, like ostracized. Like, I wanted to belong, and I just tried to find ways. I wasn't cool enough to be the drummer. I wasn't cool enough to ever play guitar in a rock and roll band. And then somehow, and I talked too much, But darn if sometimes when I played a party, I knew the right song to play. And honestly, I've done interviews. Playing records is an art. If you use the analogy of it being a collage, I can use other, media to create new media. So damn right, I'm an artist. I may be a crappy guitar player, but there's a reason why I've lasted this long and I've done so many gigs, and that, I play other people's music really well and I tell a story, and that's important for an artist to tell a story or give thought for a conversation, right?
Yeah.
Art is a conversation. Art, can you touch someone's soul visually, sonically, and then make them either come up to you or have a discussion? Wow, I was at this party the other night and I met cool people, but I also heard cool sounds. And all of a sudden, that's what culture is. It's that like inspiration of like,
Yeah.
wow, the clothes they were wearing, the sounds that were made. And there's a whole vibe, right, to a culture, a sound. And disco was cool because
Yeah.
disco happened in the 70s when the world was going to hell. But some people, notably the gay communities, right?
Hmm.
Like they're already marginalized.
Yes.
And I
And in the
played
black
the gay
community as
clubs in
well.
town.
In the
Right.
black, yeah.
So they're like, you know what? Everyone's welcome, but we're going to do our
Right.
own thing, but everyone's welcome. So I used to play before notes. I would start going to, gosh, it's a food supply, Longos, but there used to be Studio 812. And I would go there and play after hours because the new wave kids would mix with the gay kids and all the other people who would stay up at night. So there was a few late night places that I would play. Then I became the backup at Notes, and all of a sudden I'll make the backup. And then my guy gets a job, and at 19 I started a Monday night that became famous for 8 years. And I fought with the people on the weekends because I wanted to play new music, but he backed me up. And I went through a bunch of people. I went through. Ultimately, the owner became Mary Bray and this guy called Shmuel Farhi, who owns everything.
He still does.
Long story, but let me not throw any stones at those people. But
You knew him
there's a
back
reason
then?
why. What's that?
He was around back then?
Oh yeah, I can tell you
Wow.
stories,
I
but
didn't know that.
I'm
Yeah,
trying to be
we'll
I'm trying to be gracious in this
we'll
interview. But
save
let's
that.
just say we never got
Well,
along.
it's interesting. Something you just said. So Grandmaster Flash was talking about how he was invited to go where the college kids were, the university kids. And he says, well, what do you want me to play? And he goes, just play what you normally play. And he's like, seriously? Like, you think they're going to like that? He's like, just do it. And then he says he goes there and he's playing like Billy Squire and he's playing
Right, big
B-52s
beat, back to
and he's
back.
playing
Yeah,
everything. And he's saying
right.
in his neighborhood, Grandmaster Flash in the black neighborhoods, he wouldn't have been able to do that.
Well, they could.
Like
Actually,
there's certain songs he wouldn't have been able to play there, and certain
yeah,
songs he wouldn't play in the
yeah,
rock lounges. But at the universities and the kind of
right,
places you're talking about,
right,
where gay kids are, where university kids are, the punk rock kids, you can do it all.
right. But here's the trick. And my guys were technically great. Grandmaster Flash is very good. Some of the other guys weren't very good, but they were good song selectors. So
Right.
so here's the context, and I'll give you a bit more depth to this. So Billy Squire is like as rock and roll as it gets. Big Beat was a big record. But what happened is the intro of the song had big beats.
Mhm.
So now I wasn't playing in Brooklyn or the Bronx, but you don't play the vocals, and then the key song is the Aerosmith and Run DMC, right? Walk This Way. Two groups coming together. But what did Run DMC do? And think of Big Beat. You play the intro over and over. The beats, a little bit of guitar, and you scratch it. And you don't let these guys sing because they're rock and roll guys with black hair, and they just don't fit the community. Like the minute you hear Stephen Perry, whoever the singer is, Aerosmith, all the urban kids are going, oh my, this guy's like a policeman or something, or and so you would play the beats from Big Beat and you'd reel them in, but you wouldn't play the vocals. But if you play the vocals at the universities, the kids are like, okay, you're playing this in a different way, and you've got this beat is good. Oh yeah, great. It's like it's someone we can relate to, right? A
Well,
white singer.
yeah.
So
Well, even
these were
at
cutting edge of blending, making a collage. And I would play new wave to older people who like soul and funk. And I had to blend that, and mixing it allowed you to bring people together, whether it was the gay community, or I like soul and funk. And so we were playing, whether it was Cameo, when Atomic Dog came out, I played it for the new wave kids. Now, new wave kids George Clinton is a freak, but if they saw the video, George Clinton is kind of new wave, but he's not. You know, he'll eat you for breakfast, you know, Bootsy Collins, you know,
Yeah, Bootsy
or
Collins.
James Brown. But, you know, if you mix them right, everyone comes together. And so we created that ourselves here, and I played every night. So I would mix different music. But you know, Grandmaster Flash is very important. Africa
Yeah.
Bambaataa is very important. Bad mixer, but excellent. You know, he stole Kraftwerk. I mean, Planet Rock is just
Right.
Kraftwerk.
Planet
You
Rock
know
is Kraftwerk.
that,
That's right.
I mean, it was blatant. Except Kraftwerk could, you know, eventually Kraftwerk Philharmonic Orchestra, because of Africa Bambaataa, were cool. But when you look at Kraftwerk and you're from the Bronx, these fucking robots ain't gonna get, you know, out of here alive, you know? These German fucking
That's
android dudes, you
right.
know, like they're gonna get fucking, you know, beaten up,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah, I was in through the Bronx in the 80s, so trust me, I felt uncomfortable. I've done
Mm.
parties in Detroit and I felt uncomfortable, but that's not the
Wow.
point, because we went there and we connected with people with Rich Houghton. You know, we don't go stepping on, you know, we're like, you know, don't you people speak my language or shit. We went and shared music around the world. I've been to war zones. I mean, Detroit was one of them. Now it's really
At the
nice.
time, yeah.
But, you know, we go and connect with people over music, and we never really had any problems. Shit happens. But
Yeah.
I personally, you know, I mean, you know,
With,
I get music allows me to get along with people, you know?
yeah, and there was just as you're getting into it,
You know,
there's there's a change with in the way the medium is actually perceived. So it used to be if you said to somebody late 70s, 80s, what do you do? I'm a DJ. It's like, oh, what do you do? Weddings? Right.
well,
And then
especially in North America,
right,
but Europe was a little better and
exactly.
different.
And then so I don't know if you remember 24-hour party people, but there's this great line where the Coogan character, Steve Coogan character says, look, they're at the Hacienda in Manchester. And he says, look at everybody. Everybody's dancing. He goes, look, they're not applauding the band or the singer. They're applauding the medium, the DJ. All of a
Yeah,
sudden now the DJ becomes the man in a club. And when do you
yeah.
start seeing that? Late 80s, middle of the
Well,
80s?
look,
Like here, not in Europe, but here.
I could tell you that I would argue the scene has jumped the shark, so to speak. You know,
Wow.
EDM is in the rock and roll stadium phase of its um, lifespan. In the day, you know, I'm like an awkward DJ to watch because I don't do the whole I'm a rock star. So in the earlier days of the clubs, going to the 70s and 80s, yeah, some guys became famous, but they were loved for being great selectors. So in the old days of a club, rock and roll was like go to a stadium and worship these guys. So, you know, we can get now I'll get into a very more profound sort of like philosophical, you know, people want to believe in something and have an ideology. To me, an ideology is a cult, you know, and, you know, I didn't subscribe to the cult of Led Zeppelin or Bruce Springsteen, or even the cult of Plastic Man. You know, I mean, people need to follow people, but I don't do anything to start a cult. So, um, in the day, it was it was a lovely room, a lovely room and sound that brought people together that would dance together, not all stare at the priest or the icon. I don't believe in heroes. So, DJs were
That's what they're doing now, right? Like you
DJs were
there's 20,000
iconoclasts.
people.
I would have a negotiation with the club owner. You know, people don't come here for the food, and I need, you know, a good payment. I'm not going to work, and I never worked for $100. DJ still worked for $100. Well, I'm better than that, but I had to articulate my economic value proposition, right? So, so I don't believe in icons, except, you know, I live in a campus world. I need to make iconic money. You know, if I'm generating $10,000 a night, you need to pay me 1,000. Well, there's 10 kids that work for free and want your job. Well, I'm not 10 kids. Like I said earlier, I'm not like the other boys. So, like, what are you trying to tell me? And a few times I quit, and they would lose a few $1,000s or more. And, like, you know, it didn't look bad then, me being the best DJ and helping them make a few more $1,000, you know? And so I quickly learned to make money, but justify and understand my value. So as the DJ became very big, then now, I mean, it disgusts me. You know, people standing like zombies with their phones at their
Yeah.
icon.
Not
Now,
dancing. And they're not dancing. They're just standing.
yeah, so I purposely, you know, I mean, you know, I'm not there to put on a spectacle. I understand that people want a spectacle, so what happened in rock is like I still feel like the blues guy who's playing for 250 people, and I enjoy it more. I don't like playing in a stadium, but I played stadiums. I may never play a stadium again, but I'm not going to say never, because it just doesn't turn me on. I don't need fire. I don't want fireworks. And there's a song, "Therapy" by Dan Diamond, who I kind of discovered, and he was in my movie and stuff. But when I go to a club, I don't go to the fire coming out of the speakers, or the fancy fucking champagne. I just go there for the music. And that song resonated with me when I was at the height of my fame, because all of this stuff. When you hear a great musician and they might play for 100 people, and DJs make tons of money, and I made really good money, and now they make even more, and I'm not jealous of that. But look, when you push a button and jump up and down, at least be respectful that there are people who are struggling to make a living, and they're actual virtuosos. So, and this is where rock and roll became silly in the 80s. These idiots, and it's Spinal
Yeah.
Tap, right? These people think
Yes.
that they're geniuses. Well, let's
Yes.
talk about Spinal Tap. Like, where am I? I'm just like going to do the same shit
Yeah.
and make a lot of money, because it's the zeitgeist. So some people get confused with zeitgeist. And for me, as I started understanding it, it's about navigating, appreciating the fact that people, you might be iconic to them, and they'll give you that stage and listen to your voice and your sound. And I respect that, but I also don't take advantage of that. I, purposely and thoughtfully do that. Other people are like, okay, I'm famous, like I'm going to be famous forever, and now I can start telling people, about economics, and I'm going to tell governments what to do, and I'm going to tell people how to vote. Which I have an opinion, but that's not my role as a public person who makes people happy. I am not afraid of having an opinion. I have very strong opinions, and but I won't speak as a voice of authority. So,
Yeah.
for example, let me make a political statement. So,
Sure.
when people ask me, I've been to, I was going to Lebanon and Israel. I went to Israel, and the Intifada started. Look, I don't like war, and I don't like terrorism. So when people ask me, I'm like, I studied as a Catholic. I studied the Bible, Old New Testament, and I still haven't found where in the Bible it says 1,000 eyes for an eye. And there's my opinion about what's going on. You figure out where I stand. I don't like anyone dying. I think, when people are celebrating, a lovely event, trying to bring all people together at a rave or at a club or at a gathering, it is awful for someone to not allow people to celebrate. It's awful to kill a person. It's awful to kill other people in retribution. So there you go. But there's my thing. Where does it say 1,000 eyes for an eye? If I hate you, and we come from Italy, right?
Yeah.
You took a rock from my property, so I'm going to kill you, and then you're going to kill, my family in the next generation. This is nonsense.
I
Like,
voglio vendetta. I want a vendetta. And
exactly,
then you
evil
kill
eye.
my son, I
So
will kill your son. Then it
again,
goes on and
so
on. And then brothers get involved.
if we are enlightened or not,
Mm.
we shouldn't walk into these same, like, terrible voids of really, just humanity,
Yeah.
right? Let's be better. Each culture talks about, but a lot of times when we're faced with that opportunity, we err and repeat the same things. So, I didn't want to be like my father, but yeah, some days you have to be conscientious. It doesn't mean I hate my father, but on some days I understand why they're like, were like they were. And if I'm better than that, I have to learn to be better than that. Period.
Right.
Oh, I had a bad day. I did the same old shit that I, was traumatized about. And then does that make you a better person? No. You're the same animal that you hate.
It's you're I'm still I'm taken aback by I never thought about this before. And something that
Well,
you said a couple times when you said about how it's in stadium throws right now. Like
yeah,
you're
think
saying
about it. Look,
electronic music is like big hair
look,
band was in the 80s?
it is. It is.
Wow,
I
that's
mean,
horrible
well,
to think
so think
that.
about it. So look, original techno coming out of the 80s, 90s, like rockabilly. And then the 60s was the golden age. This is the 90s raves were like the 60s concerts, like the Bill Grahams. When the Rolling Stones were playing small stadiums. But at
Mhm.
the end of the 60s, it all changed, right? With Woodstock,
Right.
with Fremont, with the Rolling Stones. So I read all the rock and roll books, and damn, it's not history that repeats itself. Man repeats itself, rather humanity, not to be,
Yeah.
so when I saw this coming, I'm like, wow, at first I'm like, I thought, I don't know where club culture is going, especially if you live in North America. And vinyl was dying, and I'm like, I went to Europe. I'm like, oh, wow, this shit's thriving, and people get it, and they celebrate. They might be a little hedonistic, and I mean, when I had a family, I always had that edge, like, God, can people like wake up in the morning and take care of business? Which is like, my hobby is being normal, and I want to make sure my family, had my. I started saving money so my kids could go to school and I could buy a house instead of live the dream and rock and roll, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So, um, and then I'm like, it lasted longer than I ever thought. I was burned out as a DJ when I met Rich Haught in 1990. I was like in my mid to late 20s. And damn if I didn't have an extra 30 years career, and I made amazing money. I did about 4,000 shows. And I mean, everyone knows what DJs make now. So yeah, I made really good money, except stupid me. I saved it. I paid my taxes, and my kids went to a good school, and we're not poor. And that's amazing, you know?
Yeah, there's very few people that can actually do what they love and actually make a living off of it. And
Well, you got
and
to
and
wake
then
up in the morning and
you have
do
to
it.
you got to do the work. You have to do the gig.
That's right. I'm doing my accounting tonight, so I'm in between
Is everything
accounting. So having this conversation, but we won't tell anyone.
is for people that have never been to either a club, like a dance club, or a rave, it really is when it's at its best. I tell people, like, usually nobody's fighting at these things. People getting along. You see people from different walks of life, different religions, ethnicities, skin colors. When it's right, it is magical. But in order to get that magic, are most people on Molly? Do you think, if you had to take an educated guess at,
Well, so we all have different
full disclosure,
levels.
by the way, I tell my students I will not lie to them. So full disclosure, yes, I've done it. So I will. This is nothing to do with you. I'm just saying on my part.
Sure. I
So
mean,
I'm
look,
talking
look.
from first experience.
I've always been, as a young student, when it comes to learning, I'm an empiricist. So I some people just have a different level of stimulation. So I said earlier, I'm really like a rainbow. I'm on the spectrum. I'm highly, highly sensitive and stimulated all the time. I can remember the first time. I just have a very particular mnemonic type memory, and I can certainly tell you. I probably drank a bottle of alcohol every day of my life, a bottle of whiskey,
Wow.
and then whatever other stuff goes around. So people need, but don't need certain things to celebrate in the history, whether it's a harvest, Western culture in the European, whether it's a Bacchanalia, Saturnalia, people come together, and the history is, you know, you're having a feast and a harvest. Well, LSD before it was kind of isolated. Well, if you leave bread and it's got mold, sometimes you're eating food that's maybe rotten and you're having food poisoning or slash a trip because that mold will take you on a trip. So, I may have eaten some bad food in my life, so I'm just being silly. But so it doesn't matter. Some people are stimulated, some people need more, whether it's shots. Some people think they're better on alcohol or whatever stimulants, or some people have personalities that drop out. I love psychedelic stuff. I've never done heroin that I know
Mm.
of, but man, I love that music. I get it. I don't need to do heroin to appreciate, heroin music, but a lot of people do, and that's
Mm.
dangerous. So, you know, people can do whatever the hell they want, but I had kids, so I'm not going to go, hey kids, you want a real full life experience? Let me just bring in, be discreet, be that. But yeah, so people come to celebrate. They eat, they drink, and they do whatever else that hasn't killed them. I spent a lot of time in South America. So, Western culture is both super, like, the British, the Victorian age was as about, conservative as it gets, clothing and, Ibiza is more hedonistic, I mean, and go topless, nude. People don't care. Whereas in, British culture is like, oh my God, you got to wear like, this and that. And so some cultures are very open-minded, hedonistic, permissive, and others not. And it does affect the parties. I mean, but a friend of mine was telling, without digressing too much, but yeah. So most people are not exceptional. The artists are very exceptional in their feelings. So I've got a lot of friends who don't do anything, and I rarely do it. When I had a family on my own, I just love drinking. And I think I know your dad, my dad, and they drank every day of their lives until they couldn't, and I'm that kind of guy. I've got the alcohol gene. And but not everyone can or should. So, but I'm not here to tell people. I just feel bad when people, I've seen people die from, alcohol poisoning or worse, overdoses. You want that experience, but yeah, um, parties are celebrating and enjoying the best things in life and the extreme things in life. And raving went off the charts. So, in the cities, and I've been to war zones. So I've been to Israel, and everyone. I was doing a residency in Jerusalem, right, in the East Bank, and it was something weird. I didn't quite get the first time. Everyone's a little bit older, and and they're really going for it. I've been to Croatia, Serbia after bombings. I've been to places where and people party even harder. And I was like, remember in Israel, everyone's like in their late 20s. Well, damn it. And even now, everyone is conscripted. It used to happen in Europe. So when you're 18 to 21, you are in the army. And when you get out of the army, you're going to party your tits off. And boy, did I witness it. Now, I bet you they drank a lot of alcohol, and they also did other things. I wasn't asking, but you can, so I'm trying to be discreet given that, but yeah, people lose it. And it's funny, the kind of people in the different cultures and the different cohorts that people will, on one hand, be the enforcers, the saviors of their society. And then when they're off duty, who does the psychologist go to have, psychoanalysis? Sometimes they probably self-medicate. I'm just saying, right?
That's unbelievable. The thing about my concern is I want this generation to have as much fun as I did or you did. And I don't think that they should have to die from it. And unfortunately, now they're putting fentanyl in a lot of
Well,
drugs, and there's a lot of synthetic drugs also now that are
sure, because they
popular.
keep tweaking. So yeah, I do
Right.
read a lot, and I can tell you about that. Look, so if you use, I mean, this is stuff I've read. If fentanyl was really more complementary with heroin, and so if heroin costs, I'm making this shit up for round numbers. If heroin costs 100,000 a kilo, but fentanyl for a kilo costs 5,000, well, you're going to get the same buzz, especially if the person doesn't know what they're doing. So the thing is, it's like whether you make bad bread and you add wood pulp to it. You want a cheap additive so you make more profit. The problem is, much like a bad restaurant or a bad chef, a bad person not properly mixing their stuff might save money, but they're going to give you food poisoning or kill you one way or another. A bad restaurant that doesn't wash their pots or cooks, So if these people are mixing or preparing, they just don't give a shit. But I think that's bad in business. Whether you have a restaurant or any business, you want your customers' best interest at heart. So it's unfortunate, but that's sort of the shadow economy when it's not regulated. So I'm glad where Canada's going. In a macro sense, I'm a free market person. No, I had kids and I have workers, so I will give them, a bit of a nudge. You can't have everything. I'll give you the blue pill or the red pill. My kids, as much as I wanted to, but if they're 8 years old, I'm like, listen, you can go to bed at 8:30 tonight or 9. And if you're grouchy and you go to bed at 9 or 9:30, I'm going to suggest you go to bed at 8:30. So if I'm responsible, I don't want to tell people this is the law and I'm going to whoop your ass. So, I think Canada's going the right way, but there's no right way when you've got, the masses and the certain, political interests. In a perfect world, everyone has great judgment, great common sense, and you can do whatever the hell you want. Because if you want to do heroin or fentanyl, hey, Michael Jackson and Prince, you know, didn't do drugs, except they did drugs, and they were being prescribed profanol. I've done some medical surgeries, and I can tell you I've done that stuff, and I wanted to take some home. It's really good, but that's proper medicinal stuff, and they overdosed. You know, and that was like legal best shit. I know some anesthesiologists, and I joke like, if I had to do drugs, I remember when I had my wisdom teeth out, or I remember when I had some other surgeries. I'm like, what is this shit? Provenol? Like, damn, this is good. I mean, I can understand why people do it. I mean, so yeah, I've done, stuff. But when someone scrupulous guy does it, you could die. So, it's not like I want to get sick so I can go to the hospital and do some profanol, but um, our society should take care. People are going to die anyways. People die driving a car. This is why we have a lowest common denominator thing called the speed limit. With an increased speed limit, people tend to die. I'm a statistician. I get the concept of the distribution of all this stuff. People die no matter what, but you want to mitigate it. So we make money from taxes on cigarettes, but it costs the economy a lot of money. Now, there was a dark economy, a shadow economy in marijuana. I think Canada made a prudent, as a very progressive business person, to legalize it. It's finding its spot, but better legalized and controlled, whatever the price point is. But it allows for people who do or don't do money. So if you don't do drugs, you don't smoke. Actually, it's good your government regulates it. Yes, people will take advantage of it, but at least it's regulated. And for you who don't do these things, there's money that goes into the coffers. These things are called sin taxes. I confess I drink pretty much every day of my life, and I'm going to pay whatever.
You're scaring the shit out of me right now, John.
No, I'll pay whatever it takes to drink. My alcohol. I've been to Scandinavia. We paid, $12 for a beer, and if I need a beer, I'm going to have a beer. But and then the government should step in and provide, whether it's the clinics, when people are dying in the West Coast. So the imported stuff is coming in from China. So I mean, I understand economics, and there are unscrupulous people who will feed you shit, and they don't give a crap if you die. But that's the same thing. I'll sell you a used car with the brakes that don't work, and I don't give a shit once you go off your. So there's a lot of bad people in everything. It's not just drugs. It's not just, it's just like the character of people. And right now the world is like, and this is a philosophical thing. It's the banality of evil and philosophical suicide. The banality of evil is Hannah Arendt. Philosophical suicide starts with kind of Albert Camus. It's like, I'm just doing my job. It's the law. No, actually, it's common sense. We live in London, and like, none of us people are bad. But the police like to stop us. They're the people making more money than us, and they make 100,000. But and that's cool. I mean, I can be cheeky and go, they were the C students of our world, but doesn't matter. They're here not. They're here to protect us, not further tax us to make more than six figures. And they make more, they have their bells and whistles ringing. But I had a friend who was a prominent businessman. He bought a Mustang, and he was driving 10 kilometers over the speed limit in the school zone. So he's driving a Mustang at 50 kilometers an hour. And cop stops him. He's like, what are you doing? Like, I just bought this thing, and I wasn't drag racing. Well, you're 10 kilometers over the speed limit. Yeah, but it's the summer. Okay, well, okay, fine. I'm sorry. I was excited having a new car because and then like, your tint is too much. I just got it off the lot. Like, I didn't purposely break the law. You have to peel it off. Like, like he wasn't even a minority. And I was joking to my friend, you got profiled. He's like a normal guy. I'm sorry. I drove over 10 kilometers of the speed limit, and I picked it up off the lot. Well, we're going to compound your car. Well, I mean, that power grab is wrong. You're right. You've already got your sirens blaring, and whether it's like a Muslim kid or a black kid or man or a woman, like, hey, are you from this neighborhood? This is a school zone. You're going a little fast.
Yeah, slow down a bit.
You again. But if you were going more, I'd give you a ticket. Do you realize that if you go, 15 kilometers over the speed limit, you're a community servant, and that's wrong. And I will fight, against that common sense. And that's philosophical suicide. I'm here to protect you. No, you're dominating me and you're threatening me. You are not doing community service, whether, like pulling over a rich white guy or an immigrant or a child or a woman, or he reached into his pocket. There's common sense. In Canada, we should have more common sense so we don't carry guns. So, I joke to my American friends, I don't smoke pot or carry a gun, so I'm not a good libertarian, like, give me a break.
Um,
So there, you got me going there.
yeah, I forgot what question I was going to ask you.
Oh, that's fine. I'm an
That
amateur
happens
everything.
all the
I'm
time to me,
amateur
though.
fauna.
Um,
Yeah.
where do you see? Because you seem like you're a little disappointed in where electronic music is going, just because of it's different. It's bigger. The scope of it is different. The attitude is
No,
different. Where do you see it going? Is this the end, or do you see another phase after this? What happened after
um,
rock? After the Stadium Rock, it kind of turned into grunge, right?
well, I'm surprised a revolution hasn't happened in a number of fronts, culturally, it doesn't matter. Again, everything has its cycles, and I can't believe that I've lasted this long. I just don't want to try to be relevant. I can be relevant, but I'm not enjoying the public spectacle. It's not, I don't like to jump up and down and push a button. I like to select songs. Doesn't matter. So I'm not unhappy. I'm not. It's I graciously hand the baton over to the next generation. I was a steward of many generations, and I also did the steps to be part of the paradigm shift from analog to digital. I had a vision, and I made that happen. With the Final Scratch, Tractor Scratch. Pioneer obviously perfected CDJs. We addressed and created more per unit royalty than ever before at Beatport. I personally called out privately. And I'm not here to bring our industry down. I'm trying to lead by example and do better things. So, if you're an underground artist, you're never going to make money getting a million streams on Spotify. SoundCloud never really monetized people, but I'm also friends with these people. I can only say, well, this is what I'm doing at Beatport. If an underground person sells 10,000, we take, we sell it for 250 in the day. I sold that in 2013, but for 250, we take 40%, but the artist gets $1.50. So if you're an independent artist and you sell 10,000 units, you and your label share $15,000. Ask me if you
Spotify, it's
get
a
15.
quarter. It's a quarter of a cent if it would be Spotify, right? Quarter of a
Right.
cent or
So,
less.
so an underground artist on the right site, Bandcamp's a little cheaper. It's about creating more per unit royalty. There was an article, I forget who wrote it, from Harvard, but the concept of 1,000 fans. So look, I think Noam Chomsky's dead, so I don't think, or too old, but he's MIT. But the concept of an
He's not
artist
dead, by the
having a
way.
fan, and having 1,000 fans that will buy your CD, go to some shows, but give you over the course of the year $100, you're making $100,000. So let me do the math for people. If we need to be middle class, you need to make, close to $100,000. Pay your taxes, but so there's a lot wrong on when me speaking on behalf of an artist is a lot wrong, because an artist is like, I just want to do good, and then they get abused. I tried to help bring people up, starting with me. If I'm going to DJ, I need to get paid, and I have to stand up for myself, and I have to justify why I make money, why I deserve money. And then I kept taking those principles. So look, I live in a capitalist world. I'm also kind of a good capitalist, but just because I might be smarter than some people doesn't mean I have to take advantage of them. And that's sort of what's wrong in this world. Now, by no means am I a socialist. I'm on 360. I'm like 361 degrees. I can dance left or right of whatever, just for the sake of conversation. And that's sort of what I'm doing in this interview. You're giving food for thought and perspective.
No ideology fits the world. As soon as you look at the
No, it
world through
doesn't.
an ideology, you're lost.
Right. I don't belong to cults, and therefore I'm an
Mhm.
iconoclast. I don't do things to be followed because I don't like to be followed or worshipped. I just want to be part of, I want everyone to be who they are, and hopefully everyone's good or really good or just finding their thing. It's okay. My mom cleaned hotel rooms, and she was really good at it. She still makes my bed when I'm home. When I'm home, I come home so I can sleep in a bed. She makes my bed. She's really good. I'm really sloppy. Whatever she did well, right? Our mothers are like that. They may
Yeah.
not be as I don't know about your mom. I don't think our moms have university degrees, but damn
No.
if they're not thoughtful and good at what they do when it comes to food, when it comes to taking care of family. You know, my mom
Yeah.
folds clothes better than I've ever seen. So she thinks about how can I be the best clothing folder, and she puts her passion into being, you know, the woman of the household. Cliched because our family's Italians, like the women gets pigeonholed, but my mom never complains, and so I'm not going to bring her down for believing in God and going to church and having faith in that, because she is the epitome of a good Catholic, of being thoughtful in other people. So
I
I
gained a
I
lot of
just
wisdom from my mom and from aunts and other Italian women. That's where
yeah,
the
I mean
wisdom
your
is.
mom, I mean I think your mom's also lovely, positive women, and I like women for that, because in my family, I come from, look, Latin people are more machismo than others, and I love my dad, but I knew your dad a little bit, and my dad and your dad, they would start drinking, they get really blustery, and luckily the men did all the work and made all the money, and the women were just taking care of them. But all joking aside, we do come from these stereotypes, and again, you and I, I wish my family would be more progressive, but it is what it is, and I can only try to be a better person and not argue. And it's hard with my parents because I don't agree with their archaic ways, but it's fine.
My mom actually worked shift work to put me through university and put the
She
other
was
kids through
Northern
college.
Telecom, wasn't she?
She was at Northern Telecom
Yeah,
and
I mean, your mom
shift
was
work.
better paid than my mom,
Yeah,
but I
but
mean, yeah, I'm
yeah.
just joking. No, I
She'd be
mean, I've
going like
always loved her.
8 in the morning. She'd be going to
Yeah,
work at 8 in the morning to like
yeah,
midnight, and my
and
father
your
would be
mom
playing canasta.
And your mom probably cooked every day like my mom, and
Absolutely.
every day of her life, because I don't know about you, but we were too poor to go to restaurants. I mean,
Yeah.
I had two vacations in my life until I became internationally famous.
Internationally famous DJ John Acquaviva, now
Yeah, I had
entrepreneur.
two vacations to my village in Italy, so I'm highly upper middle class in my upbringing.
Actually, once I pause, I want to
Sure.
talk to you about what Italy's like because I haven't been there in a while and I'm
Oh,
hearing some
oh,
things. So I want to talk to you
okay.
about it
Well,
afterwards.
what time? Pause. Let's do a
But
pause, but we may
but
have to
first, I
stop.
want to
Oh shit!
thank you
Hang
very
on.
much. Okay, thank you so much for this.
My pleasure.
This is I love talking to creative people, and I love heterodoxes, people that don't think like everybody else in their group. So I appreciate that. So goodbye to you, and I'll pause. And remember, everybody, don't trust anyone over the age of 30.